this is Ted Kelly with another Ted's Hospitality Minute. And today we've got a super awesome guest on. His name is Andy Ingraham. He is a walking icon in terms of helping minority African Americans get into the hotel ownership arena. And since we're celebrating Black History, who other would we like to talk to other than Andy Ingraham, who is the president, founder of the National Association of Hotel Owners, Operators, and Developers. Andy, how are you?
I am great this morning. I'm in sunny South Florida. Just got back from the Bahamas, and what great weather. Nothing to complain about. Let's just make some more money building more hotels around the country owned by Africa.
Wow, and that is awesome. Man, you have been a trailblazer for promoting and opening doors for African Americans to get into the hotel ownership arena. And you have been doing that for quite a while now. Talk a little bit about that journey. How did you get started with NABHOOD and what made you do it?
Well, Ted, thank you for this opportunity, and it's always great to be on your show. I find it so informative and just a great place to be first thing on Friday morning as I start my weekend. Back in the early days, there was something called the Green Book. And the Green Book allowed African Americans to travel around the United States and find facilities, bed and breakfast, small hotels that catered to African Americans. The reason for that was very simple. It was difficult in the early days for people of color to be recognized, to be given the opportunity, not to be shut out of restaurants. And therefore, I like to make that point because hotels were around before I got started back in 2001. All we did, quite frankly, is use the idea of the postman that developed the Green Book, and we put a brand on it. And why did we put a brand on it? Because we want to have a wider reach. Times has changed to some degree. And there were more people traveling with the advent of airline and cruise ships and trains. But back in 2001, when as a tourism consultant, I started off looking at travel trends, particularly in the Caribbean, African Americans traveling. And we noticed something that we seem to be in many aspects of the business. Remember, Bob Johnson almost got into the airline business. But we seem to be in every aspect of the business except owning hotels, owning Hilton's, Marriott's, owning IHG, Choice. And so when I looked around and began to examine that, and what really caught my attention back in 1999, a young man by the name of Damon John and Keith Clinkscale approached me about putting on a conference. And I made a decision, got $1 million from Damon John to put on FUBU Y2G. If you remember FUBU, and we decided to do that in Martin, and I made a critical error. I hope Damon John is not watching your show to find out that I made an error because I made a commitment to the date, not fully nailing down the hotel because during that period of time in the Caribbean, hotels typically close for a month. Everybody took vacations. Today they don't. Travel is an all year round business. And then, of course, I had to cut a deal with the hotel to keep it open for a week. And I said to the GM, gee, I might as well just buy the damn hotel. It was just that expensive to get a hotel open for a week when I really only needed, I believe, it was 3 or 4 or 5 days. But it got me start thinking, why don't we own hotels? And so I began to look around, and I had a bunch of friends that had the wherewithal. And I said, hey, we should be into the hotel business. And there was a young man in Memphis, Tennessee by the name of Mabel Holyfield. Mabel was an accountant. He worked at a hotel, or he represented doing the books at a hotel. The hotel was going belly up. the owner was going to go into bankruptcy, and Maber said, "Listen, we'll take over the hotel," both him and his partner. So he became the first branded hotel owner in the country with a Best Western in Memphis, Tennessee. And I called him up. I said, "Maber, this is great business. How'd you get in?" He said, "By default." And so we started along that line. Let's see how we can get African Americans into the business. And of course, when I looked at the growth of travel and the trajectory, it was very clear that this can be a lucrative business and a business where we weren't players. And so you fast forward and you kept looking from 2001, and think about it. We held our first official board meeting in a place called Peachtree City, just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. At that time, former NFL safety Donnell Thompson became the chairman of the National Association of Black Hotel Owners. We put a name together, about 7 of us, including Jay Patel, my longtime business partner from the Asian American Hotel Owners. And let me just go back. Think about this. So there was another minority group called the Asian Hotel Owners Association, and essentially they were in the business, and I had a lot of breadcrumbs just following what they did. They were they came to this country, found a niche market, got into the small hotel roadside business. Today, they own almost 60% of all the hotels in the United States. And now their grandfathers and fathers send their kids off to business school, and they own some of the best hotels around the United States. We just followed their lead. They today are great partners with us. And you think about 2001, talking to African Americans, talking to hotel groups, talking to Hilton and Marriott, and some of the first members from the brand standpoint of joining us were groups like Marriott and Hilton, because they saw the need of a population expansion, the changing or the coloration of America changing, and the opportunity. And I remember Steve Joyce and Norm Jenkins working for Marriott, and Ken Farron and I going to Marriott headquarters. We had this great idea, and Marriott said, "We're in." So did Hilton. And so we started the journey. So from 2001 to one hotel in the United States all the way to today, we have over 2,500 hotels around the country. We have many more minority executives in positions as diversity officers, as development officers. We have new programs that just came out by Wyndham called the BOLD program. And of course, we have more people doing business with the hotel, more minority companies doing business with the hotel industry. Now, let me say this, that is still not enough. We're not finished. They're just north of maybe 59,000 hotels in this country, and we typically own less than 1%. So our goal is to continue to push the envelope, work with our partners, and ensure that equity, a level playing field, and more people can get into the hotel and restaurant business. And I'll talk a little bit about the restaurant business and its impact when I mention Thompson Hospitality, who is the largest minority food service African American company in the United States, with 70 restaurants around the country, serving over 44 universities and colleges, including a number of HBCU schools, doing business at the Microsoft kitchen. So, we're making real progress. And from my standpoint, I saw an opportunity. It was a growth of what I had been doing in the tourism marketing sector. And so, therefore, hotel ownership was a natural development in terms of the next step of playing a role in this industry.
Awesome. So you mentioned Wyndham with the Bowl program. I think there's several other major brands that's trying to get into promoting African American and minority hotel ownership, such as Marriott and others. Are those programs in your mind? Are they at the ground floor with nothing but upside, or what are your thoughts on how those programs will launch and operate?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the ground floor. They're all at the ground floor, quite frankly. And all of the major brands, whether it's Hyatt, Wyndham, Hilton, Marriott, Choice, IHG, uh, all of them, Sinesta, all of them, through one um, system or another, have made a commitment to increase their diverse ownership program. And it's a very simple process. At the end of the day, all money is green. At the end of the day, if they can find more diverse owners, and you and I talked a little bit about this before the show started, um, you talk about African Americans spending $109.4 billion. But here's something else that's happening. And so while all these hotels are pushing to get more African Americans, more minority owners, at the end of the day, it is still about access to capital. Number one issue for African Americans, probably for many people in many business, is access to that initial capital that you need to get into the hotel business. That's why when we look at it, what we do at NABHOOD is bring people together. So whether it's Evans Charles, who we spoke a little bit about earlier, who came to NABHOOD, his first NABHOOD meeting, when he walked away from it, he had his first partnership group put together that he found at NABHOOD, and he really had his first deal, which was in Martinsville, Virginia. He bought a 60 room Holiday Inn Express with four people that all came together at NABHOOD. So for us, yes, we're at the ground floor. Wyndham just came up with a new program. I'm happy to report they're doing well. Jeff Bellardi and Paul Cash have made a commitment. Um, here's what's so critical. If hotel brands are serious about this business, there are many people of color and African Americans that are looking to get into the business. We do this 24/7. We get all the phone calls. And at our last conference, we had a well known film producer who I had been friends with probably for the last 20 years, who I had been trying to get both him and his friends to get into the hotel business. And he attended NABHOOD last year. Well, fast forward from NABHOOD today, we're now in the process of working on his first development. That's going to be north of $200 million. He came to the summit, he saw a lot of activity, met a lot of people, and I had the pleasure of spending a couple of weeks ago at his first site that he just bought. And this gentleman, by the fact of his status in Hollywood, in our opinion, is going to bring the capital together. But think about it. It's a project that's north of $200 million. And so we tend to get a lot of those sort of people. But it is always great to have, whether it's Hilton or Marriott, who is committed. And we do a number of workshops at these brands a year where we sit through these workshops where they go ahead and talk about what their commitment is in terms of key money, in terms of marketing support, in terms of finding the right finance guys, in terms of just helping people of color to be in what I call the greatest industry in the world, that is the number one in the world and only second to healthcare in the United States.
Wow, that is phenomenal. And if that studio Hollywood movie producer needs a project manager, make sure you put our name in the hat or give him my card, okay?
Love
We
to. And here's the beauty about building these sort of developments. Remember, we started with the fact that they had the financial capacity. We're now building a team. We took somebody from our organization. We started the process of having that individual meet with their advisors, meet with their lawyers, and then finally meet with the principal. And all things knocked on cylinders. And so one of NABHOOD members would lead that team, probably as president and CEO, tremendous amount of experience this individual has. And therefore, We're hoping that we'll be able to make the announcement at our upcoming conference, July the 19th to the 21st in Miami at the Biscayne Bay Marriott. Again, where we'll probably make the announcement of that deal.
Yeah. And that, by the way, is a phenomenal conference that you've been putting on every year, promoting hotel ownership, having the workshops, all of the educational sessions that need to go with anybody thinking about trying to get in the hotel business. They need to attend that conference so they can get a grassroots, from the bottom and from the top kind of feel on what are the intricacies about participating in hotel ownership. That's a great program you guys put on.
Thanks, Ted. And I think for us, most important is the networking. When we started, there weren't a whole lot of people that we can talk about. Hey, let's talk about how do we invest or buy hotels and restaurants. This is really the forum that we do where you begin to build your network by meeting new people, people from the brands. All of the major brands are there from Hilton, Marriott. On Thursday, we have our Hilton Awards Luncheon, and I'm sure, as you would know, a couple of years ago, one of our members decided to raise money, end up raising about $650 million, and last year buying the old Trump Hotel and converting it to a Waldorf Astoria Hilton brand. You think about it, and I remember the first time we had dinner. Once that hotel had changed hands at the Trump Hotel, now the Waldorf. 26 or 27 of us sitting in a private dining room. It was surreal in terms of the trajectory that we're going and where we need to go. But I would be remiss if I didn't say this. One of the most important component, I think, to our summit is the hospitality students that we bring in from hospitality schools and HBCUs. Um, we believe that we've got to create a new group of diverse leaders, and we've made that commitment. Warren Fields from Pyramid Hotel chairs our student committees. Um, Both Wyndham and all the major brands, but particularly I want to point out Jack Bellotti and his lovely wife last year who made a commitment to support that program. So a lot of this is not just companies making a decision, but they're joining us in creating a new group of diverse leaders. And I'll tell you, one of the items I'm most proud of, we have a young lady that started with us many years ago called Ashley Johnson. Um, Ashley, great student, came in today. She's now the director of the Arnie Sorensen Center at Howard University, managing a $20+ million fund to help develop entrepreneurship, real estate, um, finance, in some of the areas that are deficient for African American students to get into the business. So I was at Sandals in Exuma and having a little tough time, and a young man came up to me and said, "Hey, Mr. Ingram, I don't know if you remember me, but I was one of your students at the summit. How can I help?" And so when I see the fruits of our labor being manifested with these young people having an opportunity, wow, it's incredible.
Yeah, and that is awesome. And one of the things that we're starting to do here on our podcast is every month we want to take a minute to find a student in the hospitality uh, sector that's about to finish school or possibly close to finishing school, and actually give them the opportunity to come on and talk with us about what are their aspirations as far as what they're looking for in the hospitality industry, hoping that we can find somebody, one of our viewers, right, that might be able to connect the dots for them and maybe offer them an opportunity to move into that first job as they finish school.
Ted, that's a great opportunity, and you can count us in trying to help you find those young people. This year, we're going to sponsor probably about 60 to 80 students from not only the U.S., but all through the Caribbean, where they can come. And Ted, they will get to meet people that when I was growing up were just non existent. And I always tell the story that my parents particularly my mother, with all my friends in the Bahamas who had cars and working at hotels, my parents would never allow me to work in the hotel sector. And couldn't understand it. I went off to boarding school and still didn't understand it. And all those guys got all the best things. They went to some of the clubs and so forth. But I finally asked my mother why. And she said, the reason why I did not is because I did not see people that looked like us in positions of authority. I saw maids, I saw everybody else. Now, by the way, at NABHOOD, there's nothing wrong with an entry level position. I'm always reminded of Don Peoples' grandfather, who worked at a major branded hotel in Washington, D.C. for 17 years as a doorman and never got promoted. Now, if I'm going to start in a business, I want the opportunity not to have the glass ceiling, but to be able to go from cleaning floors all the way to the boardroom. NABHOOD is about that. It is about that through ownership. And you think about it, when Norm Jenkins built the largest hotel in Washington, D.C., at a cost of $545 million with a public-private partnership, that is with the help of Marriott, who he had worked at, and of course the city and its public-private partnerships. But he went across the street and built a residence in the courtyard. What is one of the things he did? He brought in Thompson Hospitality to take over the food service. Now, why is that so significant? Thompson Hospitality is an African American owned company. It took over the food service, did a great job, and today they're now entering many hotel companies. I should point out Thomas Penny, who's the one of the only African Americans. I may be wrong. There may be two African Americans, but one of the only African Americans in the country as president of a large hotel management company called Donahoe. And Thomas, when we put people in those sort of positions, saw the value in Thompson Hospitality, and he then said, "Why can't Thompson Hospitality manage restaurants in our hotels?" But let me tell you something that I can brag about that Warren is doing. Remember, Warren became, at 29 years old, the youngest African American at Marriott when he left. Marriott held a significant note so that he can buy some restaurants, and he did. Move fast forward today, as I mentioned earlier, being one of the largest minority-owned food service company in the country, Warren has decided that he's going to create a program where young people can come to work for him. If those young people in his management program, after they've been there 5 years, they will then get a percentage of the profit and be able to go in business with him, therefore owning his own restaurant. So if you're there year one, you get 1%. Year two, 2%. Up to year five, 5%, you get that disbursement and the ability to partner and run and own your own restaurant. It is our little way of doing what everybody else is doing. How do we continue to build the gap or close the gap in generational wealth by providing opportunities? And really, that's all NABHOOD is. Our annual conference, we do about 10, 15 workshops a year. We do a number of them with hotel companies. We with the bold initiative to launch it. But our goal is simply, we've got to find a way to create generational wealth. We've got to find a way to increase our share so that our kids and our grandkids can then go off to business school and do what the Asian Americans have done. I mean, look at Mitch Shaw at Noble. He now runs one of the largest public-private partnerships out of Atlanta, Georgia, and continues to grow. And I'm sure every year when I go to the Hunter Conference and I see Mitt and his parents, I can only imagine how proud of his mother and father is sitting in that audience and listening to their son when they came here as immigrants from India. I'm not sure they came directly from India, but they're Indians, to see how they've taken a slice of the American dream. NABHOOD goal is to make sure the American dream is extended to people of color, particularly African Americans all over the United States and people of color throughout the world and the Caribbean.
Wow. And Andy, you summarized it so well there, and you know that I could probably go on and on talking to you and soaking up all the history and all of the great stories that you have to tell. But I'm gonna cap it here. But tell us again, the NABHOOD conference is coming up in July. What's the date so that everybody can put it on their calendar and make sure they stay in front of it?
Sure, Ted. First of all, NABHOOD, July the 19th through the 21st in Miami, Florida, at the Marriott Miami Biscayne Bay Hotel, which, by the way, has been renovated, and we're looking forward to the new facilities. Um, you can find information on the summit by going to our website at www.nabhood, N-A-B like in boy, Hood as in David.com. Or you can send us an email. Email is summit. I know I would screw this up. The email that they can send it to is summit, SUMMIT, at nabhood.com. Or if you want to talk to me, I'm happy to talk to folks that want to get involved in the hotel business. You can reach me on my cell number at 954-536-0734, or just call the office 954-797-7102. But the most important factor is that we expect to have about 500 people there this year. We have some great speakers, some great sessions on understanding how to create a business environment in the hotel sector, how to create partnerships, how to raise capital. Um, and what I find more important is the networking. We have representatives from St. Lucia, Turks and Caicos, the Bahamas, Jamaica. We anticipate the Prime Minister of Jamaica as our keynote speaker on Friday. We have a treat. We're hoping to get Mrs. Johnson, who runs Salamander, one of the most successful luxury collection of hotels in the country, who, by the way, will be speaking at the Hunter Conference next month, where I will have a chance to see her again. But you think about Sheila Johnson as an African American in the business, owning Salamander, and just recently she picked up Half Moon Bay in Jamaica, and most recently picked up the Aurora Anguilla Resort, which is a outstanding facility in the country of Anguilla in the Caribbean. So we're excited about the opportunity, and we look forward to working with you, Ted, and hopefully seeing you there. And Mark, I can't say enough about Mark, who made sure I got on. I gotta see if I can find another Mark in our operation that can help us with some of our podcasts, or maybe steal them away from you, Ted. But we talk about opportunities. Let me also point out that what in closing, what Hyatt did. Hyatt has agreed to spend 10% of their spending with African Americans. Let me say that again. Not minorities, not people of color, but 10% of the spendings with African Americans. The reason why we like that program is when you look at minority spending, you see every minority category, but at the smack dab bottom, you see African Americans. And so sometimes that hurts. Even though these programs are well mean, they don't go down to the bottom. The other thing that's going to help us in terms of growth and why hotels wants to do business with African Americans is that many Fortune 500 companies that have contacted us have said, we want to spend part of our travel budget, which is north of $10 billion, with African American owned hotels. And we're hoping by the second quarter, third quarter of this year, Ted, you or Mark will be able to go online, go to our website, find an African American owned hotel, and book it right on NABHOOD website, and it will be the same as if you were booking it at Hilton or Marriott. But our goal is to try to funnel more business to us so everybody sees the value in African American ownership.
That is awesome. That is so awesome. And Andy, as always, you always are bringing the knowledge and the information and keeping us up to date on what's going on in the hospitality industry. And obviously, I would love to talk to you for hours on end, but I've got to cut it short here. And I just want to say thank you for giving us a few minutes of your time. And we're celebrating you and the icon that you are and what you represent to all of us that want to be in the hotel business or be a supplier in the hotel business or some derivative thereof. We want to thank you and just give you a shout out during Black History Month.
Thank you very much. And Ted, Mark, thanks for the opportunity. You guys have a great rest of the day.
All right. This has been another Ted's Hospitality Minute. We'll see you guys next time. Have a great week, guys.